I'm real happy that we have Clay Cornelius as our speaker today. He's been with the Michigan Department of Treasury for over 15 years. He has a BS from Lake Superior State University in Sault Ste. Marie. He is a state administrative manager overseeing quality assurance, tax, technical, and outreach with tax administration. While at the Treasury, he worked in the Office of Collections and Tax Compliance as an auditor and as a manager in the executive office. And he is currently, in his current role, he has been instrumental in developing Treasury's outreach program. So it's my pleasure to introduce Clay Cornelius.
Thanks so much, Mike. It's great to be here, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. All right, can everyone see that?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, good. Well, thank you for having me again. I appreciate the opportunity. It takes a special guy to get excited about talking about taxes for an hour or so, but hopefully I am that special guy for you. So today I'm going to talk about your tax returns, Michigan Treasury processes, audit and other compliance activities, appealing Treasury decisions, and really an overall theme that we have at Treasury of taxpayer service. Wouldn't be a tax presentation without a nice disclaimer here to start things out. Note that this is not tax or legal counsel that we're doing here. Please consult your tax preparer for specifics on your filing. Also note that this is subject to change. We often change things in response to our taxpayer concerns and feedback. And so if you do have concerns and feedback, I'll give you multiple contact opportunities here for you to reach out to me and let me know so I can pass those along. I would always guide you to the website there, michigan.gov/taxes, for any of your inquiries. There's a lot of good stuff out there. We're really developing that website to help our taxpayers as well. I thought I would give you a picture of me before 8 months of isolation. So that's what I look like before we all went home. We work pretty much entirely at home in my area. And as Mike said, I'm the manager of quality assurance, tax technical, and outreach. That is a small area of about 30 people within a larger area called tax administration. And then tax administration itself is within Treasury. It's one of the areas within Treasury. So I've been at Treasury, when I wrote that up, I think for you, Mike, must have been around a year ago, because I've been there 16 years, over 16 years now. Most of that in tax compliance, doing, overseeing audits. Spent a few years working in the executive office, which gave me kind of an excellent perspective on everything that goes on throughout Treasury and in tax administration. And then I transitioned into my current managerial role. And this experience has also given me a little bit of an acronym problem. So I speak in acronyms a little bit more maybe than I should, and I'll try to make sure that I explain any acronyms that I use throughout the presentation. I have a great deal of experience in these areas, but my staff is even better than me in knowing the nuts and bolts of this stuff. So if I can't answer a question as we walk through today, I certainly will get back with you with an answer for my area. And I also included my email here. So you've got it. I'm going to give you some contact information I'll provide to HASP afterwards so that you can reach out to me anytime you want to. So Treasury as a whole, these are our foundational building blocks are set by our treasurer. The employee engagement, that's important. The workforce has changed over the years, and people are really looking for a place to find community, I think, more than ever before. And so we're really trying to make Treasury a good community for people to work in, not just a place to earn your paycheck. Culture of service. All these building blocks are important, but none is more important than that culture of service. And that's why we do outreach. That's why we have customer surveys. A lot of the changes that we implement are just for that very purpose. And hopefully you'll see that as a theme today, that we're really working hard to serve our taxpayers. And then continuous improvement, admitting that we're not there. We're continuously growing and improving, never to arrive at perfection, but always striving for it. And so again, as I say in most of my outreaches here, I encourage your feedback afterwards. If you have thoughts about things that we could do better at Treasury, your interactions with Treasury, or about this presentation, please reach out and let me know. It's such valuable information to us. And then when we talk about Treasury outreach, there's a whole lot of words on this screen, I realize. But the point is that Treasury outreach fits right into those goals, especially the customer service. And we're always striving to increase our customer service, help our taxpayers feel more comfortable with the taxation process, and really increase our internal efficiency as well. I enjoy taxes. I really do. But what I enjoy more than taxes is helping people out. And that's why I really enjoy outreach so much, and so does the outreach team. We love to help people out. And so I'm here for you today. Any questions you have, don't leave without them asked. And Treasury is here for you, and tax administration is here for you as well in the macro sense. So I thought I'd start with a pretty big number here. $31.5 billion. What does that number represent? Well, this is actually the September 2019 fiscal year ending revenue brought in through taxes for the state of Michigan. So this is the income taxes that you and I pay. This is our business taxes, other taxes and assessments and fees that come in. 2020 was predicted to be close to this. Obviously, 2020 is a pretty weird year, so revenues dropped quite a bit. The final numbers aren't really out. I'm not positive what they've released to the public yet, so I don't have anything in here right now. But it's dropped. It hasn't dropped as bad as we thought it would drop. And this and a lot of these numbers that I'm going to give you are according to the State Budget Office. And you can view these reports on your own. There are more reports than you could ever want out there on michigan.gov/budget if you want to go through and sift through what's out there. So what a great way to open a presentation, right? Talking about how many tax dollars we've collected from you. But we know that this is important for our infrastructure. I have no gripe against paying my taxes because I know the valuable purposes that it goes to, which we'll talk a little bit about today as well. So most of these tax dollars are collected and managed in the area that I work in, the greater area of tax administration, which is probably around 600 to 700 employees. And as I said, my area, quality assurance, tax technical, and outreach, is kind of a 30-person microcosm of this larger group with the capability to handle the most complex tax issues as well as the simple ones. And that's what gives me a great perspective on what goes on throughout tax administration. And as you may guess, accurately handling the tax returns that bring in this revenue is not an easy job or a simple job, but we'll kind of talk through it at a high level today. So our objectives, the purpose here is really just to discuss the tax administration functions that we have, walk through the journey of a tax return. We're going to discuss tax inquiries, adjustments, that scary word audits and appeals, touch upon some other Treasury tax functions that we have. And those I think will be good for us to walk through. And maybe one objective that I would add here is that when we go out on our outreaches, and we used to do in-person outreaches until about March, and now it's all transitioned over to webinar outreaches, but we get to interact with people. And that's so great, and that's so valuable. Like I said, outreach is all about helping people out. And you get to see that we're people too. We're not just tax robots over here where you insert your return and we spit out a refund or whatever. And we get to see the same of you. And I really enjoy that interaction that we can have. So I'm hoping to show a little personality here, a little Treasury personality. And I don't mind if you show a little personality as well. That'd be great. Tax administration functions, the first in our objectives there. The primary function of tax administration is the oversight and collection of almost all state tax. Compliance is always the goal. We're not really revenue driven. We're just after the proper administration of the taxes and the fees that are in our purview. We don't go after money or stretch the law. We strive for fair, correct administration of the law for all of our taxpayers. And I already mentioned that tax administration is just one part of Treasury. And there's a lot of confusion there when it comes to Treasury and different state agencies. Treasury is just one of the departments of the state. And so it's kind of important to recognize the divisions among the state agencies and the divisions within Treasury so that when you do have an inquiry, you know the right direction to go. At Treasury, we're often, people are calling us for help with, for example, unemployment. Well, that's not us, that's Unemployment Insurance Agency. Or for car registration type questions, and that's not us, that's the Secretary of State, or labor relations maybe. Treasury is separate from licensing and regulatory affairs, health and human services, Department of Technology Management and Budget. There's intersections with Treasury, but we're all different state agencies. And so once you actually get over into Treasury, we still have many diverse business areas and bureaus and groups, like, for example, local government, student financial services, Office of Collections, unclaimed property, and a very long list of other divisions and areas. Tax administration is one of those Treasury areas. I believe it's actually the largest standalone Treasury area for the very reason you saw in one of those early slides, the $31.5 billion. It takes a lot of work to properly collect the returns, administer those taxes. So I'm not going to hit you with a ton of graphs here, but I will give you a couple. This graph is state revenue. This is government-wide revenues for 2019. Again, 2020 numbers aren't out there on the budget site yet. So we have $64 billion coming in here. And I would draw your attention to a few slices of this pie. We have in the green there, general taxes at 25.5%. We have in the blue right next to it on the bottom there, taxes restricted for education at 19.6%. And then the gray slice, taxes restricted for transportation at 5%. If you add those together, that's about half of the money that's coming into the state. And you come up with that $31.5 billion. Now, when I look at this, the allocations, these are how the dollars are allocated automatically when they come in. So general taxes just go to a number of Treasury functions to pay for various expenses. That large taxes restricted for education is just that. Those are tax dollars that are restricted just for educational purposes. And that actually makes me feel good about my job and helping to bring that money in so that we can support our citizens' education. And then we have taxes restricted for transportation, same thing, they're restricted for that purpose, most likely to fix those darn roads. And then when we look at that, just the tax portion, so the 31.5 billion, this is how the money is actually coming in, the taxes that it's coming in through. So we have personal income tax at 36%, or approximately $11 billion. That's in the orange there. That's your tax returns. That's the withholding that they're withholding from your and my paychecks. That's what that money is coming in for. Then we have below that, the blue, the second largest chunk there is 26.2%, $8 billion-ish sales tax. So you go to Walmart, you buy something that's taxable, you're charged 6%, Walmart takes that 6%, puts it all in a figurative bucket, and then sends it off to the state at the end of each month. That's what the sales tax is there. Then we've got in the gray, some business taxes. In the yellow there, the use tax, which is a companion to sales tax. We've got property taxes, motor vehicle and fuel taxes, and some other taxes in there. And the main point here is that all of these taxes, except for property taxes, and maybe a small slice of the other, are administered by tax administration, the area that I work in. So they're doing a whole lot of different things to help bring in revenue and make sure that the correct amounts of revenue are paid in all of these different tax types, which are clearly essential to the well-being of our state. So 31.5 billion, that's a big number. Another pretty big number to us is 9 million. And 9 million is the number of tax returns that we receive in our area every year, approximately. So those 9 million tax returns assure that the numbers are correct and people are remitting the appropriate amounts of taxes, but it also makes every taxpayer in the state of Michigan our customer, really. And so that's why that culture of service is so important to us, is because it touches so many Michiganders in our great state here. So I'm sure you enjoy filling out your tax returns each year or having them done, as we all do. And those tax returns obviously do some calculations, come up with an amount owed, and that amount owed is what you would remit or would have already remitted essentially through your withholding taxes. And in an ideal situation, when a tax return is filed, all the forms are filled out correctly, the filing is timely, payment is in the exact amount owed, there's no questions from Treasury, there's no questions on the taxpayer side, and everything works super smoothly. It would be awesome if all 9 million returns that we received worked this way, but they don't. And it's really, I mean, it's nobody's fault. I've messed up my own filing, Michigan filing before. You know, I mean, it gets complicated when you get in there and you look at the tax laws and the forms. So there are errors and issues. And although we do process in tax administration the ideal forms that come through that work out perfectly, and that's a mostly automated process, the bulk of our man hours are spent on those returns that have errors on them, issues, omissions, we're missing forms, we're defending against identity thieves, things like that. So there's a lot of work that we do on just the forms and just the returns that actually have a lot of issues. To handle those forms, this is how we're set up in tax administration. We have two bureaus, Tax Administration Services Bureau and Tax Compliance Bureau. Tax Administration Services Bureau handles all of the returns, processing of the returns, the calls that come in from taxpayers, questions, correspondence, letters, and a number of other things for each of these different types of taxes. So we have individual income tax division. If you'll think back to that 31.5 billion slide, individual income tax was the orange portion of it. We've got business taxes, which handle several other taxes, and then special taxes. And then we have Tax Compliance Bureau, which does the auditing and the kind of the post work. I think it's important to mention here that the security of your data and confidentiality is of utmost importance to all that we do in tax administration. We want you confident when you hand over a return, when you send in a return, or you submit one electronically, that your data is safe. So we take regular annual disclosure training, every staff member. And this can be part of the reason that our systems are maybe not the most up to date, because we have to put them through such rigorous testing to make sure that the security is there, so that, again, your data is secure, and we take any threat of breach very seriously at Treasury. So everything we talk about today is undergirded by that idea of security of your data. So the first division here, individual income tax division, and this is where I'm going to kind of key in today. I mean, I could talk about any of the divisions in detail, but individual income tax division handles all those returns, like I said, the letters, the calls, the niche individual income tax items and forms, messaging. With very minor exception, they handle everything. They have areas for training of their staff, for technical support, and systems, messaging, for analysis, and probably many others that I'm not aware of in their area. And this is all basically for one tax, individual income tax. And as I said, we'll walk specifically through their process in a few minutes. I did want to mention here our challenges with COVID. So, you know, COVID came around in March, as I said. I think we've all been working from home pretty much since then. That, of course, caused some delays initially. Our phone centers were not equipped to work remotely at all. In my area, my smaller area, was able to get up and running pretty quickly as to being able to take remote calls. However, other areas lagged a little bit because their call centers were much, much larger than mine. But at this point, we do have our full functionality back for the most part. There may be a few limitations. So if you do have interactions or things you need to talk to Treasury about, everything should be fully operational right now. And I believe they were probably fully up and running by June or July. Can't get around statistics if you're talking to a tax guy. So here's some more statistics on just individual income tax processing, that one area. They have, as I said before, bringing in about $11 billion in revenue. That's 2019 numbers. That's about 5 million returns each year. So they have the most returns of those 9 million total in their area, because they're for every individual taxpayer in Michigan. 86% of those returns in our last cycle here were e-filed. So there's a lot of e-filing going on, which again, we encourage because it's less susceptible to error. And we're not all bad. We're not just all taking money in here. We're also given 2.1 billion in refunds in 2019. So that's a pretty hefty chunk people like to hear about too, the money we're giving back out. Again, compliance being the goal. We just want the right amount. So if we have more than we should have, we want to send you back your money. And then the calls, correspondence, and customer service there, just a couple numbers there for 2019, around 200,000 calls received for the year. That's way down in 2020, just because our call centers were down. I think it's around half of where we were at last year, we're at right now. Average wait for callers was around 2 minutes. So you call in, you should be talking to someone within 2 minutes, which is pretty good. And around 34,000 pieces of correspondence worked. In addition to that, 20,000 web inquiries worked in 2019. And 87% of the items worked were under 60 days. So I know that doesn't sound too impressive, but that's our goal. And some are much quicker than that too. So keep in mind, this is just one, this is just one of the areas, maybe 1/6 of all the activity that's going on in tax administration, if that. So all the other areas have these functions, they have their own numbers. I'm just giving individual income tax processing. See, I caught myself from saying IIT. I want to call them IIT, individual income tax. And we've got business taxes. As I said, this is another area. Individual income tax division handles a single tax, Business tax handles sales tax, use tax, withholding tax, filing at least, corporate income tax, Michigan business tax, maybe you remember single business tax from a while back, marijuana taxes are all handled in the business area. And like IIT, they're all set up on their own to have their training and their internal IT type support. And really the goal of any one of these areas is to go from receiving the return, addressing any issues, and posting the return. Hey, it's done, it's finalized, it's complete. That is the goal. And then special taxes, I'm sorry I couldn't resist this picture. I think it must have been cabin fever or something. I was getting a little silly, but I got a couple silly pictures in there. Not a slight to special taxes or anything, nor to their taxpayers. But special taxes, they handle a great number of taxes and fees. Many I don't know what they are or probably don't have them listed here, but a couple that they do handle are motor fuel tax, also known as IFTA or International Fuel Tax Agreement tax, tobacco tax. They handle city tax for the city of Detroit. That's maybe a lesser known thing, is that we administer taxes for the city of Detroit. So the returns come to us and then we transfer the revenue to the city of Detroit. Few smaller taxes and fees that you might not be aware of: 911 fee, airport parking, bottle deposit, convention facilities tax, health insurance claims assessment, severance tax, state real estate transfer tax, all these little taxes that you run into if you do a very specialized type of thing. On the topic of silly animals here, I do recommend going on YouTube and looking up goats fainting if you never have before. We were having a fun time watching goats faint. But anyway. And then we have that scary word, audit, switching over to Tax Compliance Bureau. And this slide almost implies that we show up on your doorstep and hand you a card and say, hey, you're under audit. That virtually never happens. First off, audit focuses primarily on businesses, so it's not usually individuals. And most of the time, it is a well-planned, we'll call, we'll set something up, we'll tell you what records we need, and then we would come out and complete the audit, review your records to essentially make sure that your records line up with the return that you had filed. And then discovery, which is little known, and they do a lot of mail campaigns. An auditor, a typical auditor in field audit would maybe do 20 audits a year, maybe more than that, a little bit more. Whereas a discovery auditor would be sending out mailings. So they would mail thousands of letters a year, and they wouldn't be getting near as into the details as, say, an auditor in field audit would be doing. Now you see this slide here. I'm not joking. Back in the office, this is what some of the discovery auditors' desks look like. It's just stacks and stacks of these letters, which means they're getting good responses from the taxpayers, for sure. But I think they're also rethinking their model for remote work. Do we have any questions on tax administration functions? Susan, anything coming in through the chat? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. So we will.
Clay, I put my question in through the chat, but I sent it to the virtual classroom, so maybe she's not there. My question was about electronic filing. I know that it's highly advantageous for the state and for the taxpayer. For those of us that don't use a paid tax preparer or tax prep software, For the federal, we can still file our return electronically by using a form fill-in on the web. Why doesn't Michigan offer a similar facility? This would increase your e-filing.
I'm just jotting your question down, actually. I don't have a great answer for that. I'm certain that it is part of the plan, but I think it's just maybe one of those things where it takes a lot of time to get there, and with a decently high number of e-filers already, perhaps it's lower in priority, even though it would be helpful, most helpful for taxpayers, but I'm speculating there. I could probably get more information for you, though, about where in the plans we're at on that one.
Clay, there's a couple questions that came up in the chat. Do you want me to go ahead and let you know what those are?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, a general question, what are a few things that would most likely get your Michigan tax return audited?
Okay, and we will probably get there a little bit later on that question. Like I said, it's mainly businesses, but that is the first question that the businesses ask is, why me? How did you select me? But we'll get there. I have a slide about that. And if I don't, circle back and make sure that I do.
Great, thank you. There are two more questions. What percent of Michigan residents do you estimate do not file annual Michigan income tax returns? And what do you estimate to be the amount of Michigan taxes that go unreported or illegally hidden?
Oh boy. Off the top of my head, I don't have any estimates. But will that question be kind of recorded so that I can, I mean, it's written down, will it stay in the system so that I can circle back and give you a response?
Absolutely.
Later?
I'll cut and paste it into an email.
Okay.
So, yeah. And then the last one that's in the chat is only 3% of revenue coming from business corporate taxes unusually low compared to other states? How does tax administration identify persons not submitting any filing in the first place?
For the corporate income taxes? Like
Those
corporate.
those are two separate questions. So first of all, just in your pie chart, I saw where only 3% of revenue comes from corporations. And I didn't know if Michigan was an outlier that way, or if it's that's typical for states.
I do not know in comparison to other states, but I do know that it's changed with Michigan business tax, which was, we currently have corporate income tax is the name of the tax. It was Michigan business tax. Corporate income tax is only on corporations. So S corporations and other types of entities like that don't have to pay that, whereas with MBT, they did have to pay that. So I don't know the logic behind it, but that's how it's set up. And then I know that companies are often switching from being C Corps to S Corps so that they don't have to pay that tax anymore. Again, I don't have, and that was probably should have been part of my disclaimer. Sometimes there's things legislatively that I have no idea why exactly it's set up that way, but it is.
My other question is more probably in your area then. If somebody just doesn't submit a return in the first place, just as sort of under the radar, how do you guys identify that such persons exist?
That is a great question. And there's a number of ways. I mean, sometimes they'll file a federal return, but not a state return. So matching that can be a way that we figure that out. I mean, we do have some data sharing programs with the IRS. And additionally, we might be able to connect something if, if an employer is withholding taxes on somebody and we don't have any tax return for that person, then there's probably a gap there. And then I'm sure there's some that are paid under the table and there's virtually no way to actually find them. I mean, not electronically or systemically other than stumbling across them.
Well,
Does
you
that
said
answer
you
your
get-
question?
Yes, it does. You said you get 5 million individual returns. I just looked it up. The population in 2019 of Michigan was almost exactly 10 million. So figuring two persons for what, between kids and spouses and stuff, it sounds like you're coming pretty, you got most people.
I think so. I hope so. Thank you for the questions. Those are good questions.
That's it for in the chat. So if you want to continue, unless somebody has a question, they want to unmute themselves quickly. Okay.
All right, let's hop into the journey of a tax return. As I said, I'm going to key in on the IIT, individual income tax process here. I'm going to talk more about the paper, but then we'll see how the electronic process relates to that. And sometimes this process, it's hard to call it linear. It sometimes bounces around a little bit, step A to B to C, back to B to C. I mean, it moves around, but these are the major steps. I'm giving you a high level here. We do have an internal 59 slide presentation I thought I'd spare you of every nook and cranny of this process. But I'm just hitting kind of the major steps. First off is the mailroom, obviously not applicable to the electronic process. Hopefully nothing happens between your mailbox and Treasury, although it's possible. But once we get in our mailroom, we have different PO boxes for different functions. So when we're asking for a return, we have a certain PO box for that. When we're asking for a payment, a specific type of payment or a different tax type, whatever it may be, we just have different PO boxes for that. And from those PO boxes, it routes to the proper areas. The PO boxes that have for the returns and for the payments are pretty much immediately sent to the bank that we have a contract with. The bank will process the payment, but the bank will also take the return, open the return for us, and image that return, which I'll talk about in a minute here. And we also have PO boxes for for inquiry letters that we've sent out, responding to those, for requesting hearings or informal conferences, and those are routed internally within the building or within to the different areas of the different buildings, just like any mailroom would for any organization. Payment processing, it seems simple, but it can be complex. As I said, they're sent right to the bank for the most part, to be cashed and then essentially determined where that payment should be applied. Sometimes payments come in with a tax return. Sometimes payments come in with just a payment voucher. Sometimes with an inquiry letter, a response, sometimes an audit, and there's other avenues. Sometimes payments come in with no identification as to what it should apply to. I don't recommend that if you want your payment properly applied. But in any case, they come in through all different avenues. Most of those payments are again sent immediately over to the bank. Sometimes we have to take a look at them to try to figure out what they're for, and then they're routed to the bank. There's a lot of matching essentially that we have to do as to payments and money. In individual income tax, it's a little easier because again, it's one tax and usually it's just one tax year. For say sales tax, use tax, those can be monthly filings. So matching payments with the amount due and then adjustments can be quite a task. And of course, electronic payments cut out some of the opportunity for error here. Loss of items, loss of a check, that type of thing. Thought this guy was kind of cute. Another of my silly moments. No slight to imaging here. But imaging is when we take basically a physical item and a physical copy of the tax return and we scan it in or take a picture of it so that we have it electronically and then we can work with it that way. And it's a little more advanced than just a picture because it actually pulls the data right off of the form. So we can work with the numbers. Those numbers will go right into our electronic system, and then we're able to adjust them, whatever we have to do with the numbers. So we will have the actual physical copy. We'll have the electronic copy, and then we'll have the numbers in our system that we can work with and adjust if we have to. This imaging for the returns themselves often occurs at the bank. Again, they do a lot of that work for us. But when it comes to, say, a response to one of our inquiries, something like that, we do image those in-house. And there's times that, you know, the imaging just doesn't work and we have to manually enter the data into the system. It doesn't always pick up the numbers off of the return, our electronic system, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good at picking them up. So at this point, we have it in our system. If you're electronic filing, you pretty much skipped the first two steps and you're just here now. The numbers are in the system already. And so that's when we allow our system to do some checks on those numbers. As I said, they're kind of converted to electronic figures. The majority of them flow through without an issue, but some have issues discovered that just by our system, flowing through our system. For example, you know, if you have a mathematical error, you add 2,000 and 2,000 and you get 3,000, our system would detect that. The automated system, it would typically send you an automatic notification that we made an adjustment to your return based on this, what we found here, this discrepancy. For some of those, our system corrects the item and sends a letter. However, of course, as I kind of mentioned before, some issues the system cannot correct. It can identify, hey, there's something wrong here, but I don't know what to do about it. And so for these, it would create a service request, what we call a service request, populate a list of these service requests, and then those items would be sent to our staff workers to see if they can figure out what needs to be done. And so that's kind of the manual process piece here, where they're going through that list and saying, hey, you know, can we resolve this with the information that we have on hand? Yes, we can. Great. We got it resolved. It's done. Or do we need more information from the taxpayer? Okay, yes, we do need to send a letter. We'll send a letter to them and ask for more information on this. In the manual processing area, they also take calls, because when we send you a letter, oftentimes that will prompt a call for clarification of what we need or other reasons you might want to talk to us. And then we also receive the responses to any letters that we sent, or even to automated inquiries that the system sends out. We'll receive responses and have to work those. When we work the item, our primary output to the taxpayer is a letter. It could be that auto-generated letter, could be based on manual review or on a call that we received requesting some information. It could be a refund. Once a return is filed, we prefer to electronically fund transfer refunds. I'm not sure if areas mandate that entirely yet. So our major processing areas, they do not make a lot of outbound calls. They do not do much with email. They do have some electronic function available on their websites. That differs by area, what's out there. Individual income tax, I believe, has some good stuff out there as far as you'll be able to contact them right through the web. I think we're making motions to shift more electronic as to our notifications here, but still most of what we do is by mail. And I would add a note here that my area, my smaller area, we do it all. You know, we will call taxpayers. They deal with in my area, the more complex things. So we'll email back and forth with taxpayers, call taxpayers quite regularly because of the complexity of the item. A conversation is almost always needed. And then hopefully we have resolution. Like I said, our goal is to get that tax return, figure out if there's anything wrong with it, and get to the point where we all agree, hey, this is what it should be. We've got it corrected. It's posted to the system, and we're all set. The return's correct. We have our tax revenue. You have your refund, and there's no further action needed. That's the goal. So briefly, to just review those items we just talked about, mailroom is where it starts. Payment processing is where the payments would be going. Imaging process is what we use to get the data into our system. System checks and processing is our system checking it and making sure everything is okay or flagging an issue. Manual processing is what we spend our man hours on in large part. Treasury outputs would be the letters primarily, and then the item is resolved. And as I said, you pretty much cut out the first 3 steps almost entirely if you file electronically, because the data just goes right into our system, the payment goes right to the bank, and you avoid opportunity there for any errors. Questions on that process?
There are a couple questions in the chat. I'll go ahead and read them. The first one is, how do taxes work for someone living in Monroe, Michigan and works in Toledo, Ontario? Well, is that supposed to be, I think that's Rick. Do you mean Toledo, Ohio? I've never heard of Toledo in Ontario, so I'm assuming, yeah.
Ohio, yes.
Yeah,
Correct.
okay, that was just a typo.
You know, off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that question, but I will get you an answer. I'm sure it's a relatively simple answer from our individual income tax technical team, but I believe it's going to be the state of residence, but I'm not positive.
The next question is, how does Michigan compare to other states in terms of best practices for income tax collection? What best practices used by other states would you like to implement?
That's another good question. I think I'll circle back on that one too. Can you set that one aside? Probably afterwards. I mean, we periodically do kind of studies of what other areas are doing, other states are doing, but it's not information that I necessarily have right at my fingertips.
Okay. Sorry, these come in and I can't see which ones I've already asked.
No problem.
If an individual Michigan income tax return is prepared by a professional tax preparer, is that return less likely to be audited?
I would say generally yes. I would say that whatever we're doing in the system to determine who our audit candidates would be is unlikely to look at that, but I would assume that it's probably a better chance because it's prepared by a professional. But again, our audit area does not do a lot of individual income tax auditing. It's mainly looking at the business taxes.
Okay, how do you distinguish contacts as legitimate and not highly skilled scams?
That's a good question. I think that, well, we have 2 different, and I was going to touch on this in talking about discovery a little bit. We have 2 different suspicious filers areas that do just that. They look at returns and they say, hey, this looks suspicious. They contact the taxpayer. Did you submit this return? Is this really you? I don't know entirely their analytics as to determining, hey, this looks fraudulent. I mean, I know one thing might be a changed address. One thing might be a changed bank account that might raise a flag, the money going to a different bank account. But other than that, they probably have things they do internally that they don't want anyone to know as far as their analysis goes, because their analysis is what these fraudsters are attempting to beat. So we don't want to disclose how in detail they're dissecting the information that we receive. Anything else?
There is one, actually two more. What is the percent of returns that have to go to manual processing section, to the manual processing section?
That varies greatly by area. And I mean, I could kind of guesstimate. I'd say it's a much lower percentage for individual income tax, almost because it has to be, because of the high number of returns, and it probably has a relatively high percentage in sales and use. Now, as to exact percentages, it would be hard for me to figure that out. I mean, I guess you'd go back to that slide about how much correspondence we work and how many calls we get, and that's kind of somewhat of an indication of the percentage of the items that would have an issue. But again, that's just IIT, and sales use and withholding, for example, like I said, they can be monthly filers. So we have 12 returns, we have 12 payments, some pay more frequently, and we have an annual reconciliation return as well. So there's a much higher probability of error on one of those many returns. So the number of taxpayers contacted might be higher, or worked, or that spring an issue might be higher, but the number of returns that spring an issue might be comparable or just a little bit higher. Because, like I said, one taxpayer has 13 returns in 1 year, potentially. Any more?
Do professional athletes owe Michigan tax for money earned when playing in Michigan?
There's actually a discovery project on that. I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I kind of think that they do, but I don't hold me to that, because it's kind of like a musician coming in and delivering a performance in Michigan. Well, there's a liability there, and a professional athlete would be no different to me than a musician, really. But I don't know if there's special, some sort of special stipulations for professional athletes.
Okay.
It's a good question, though.
Peg asked, it was similar to how she asked it before, but I think I know what she's getting at. It's just phrased a little bit differently. Is how, when the Treasury Department contacts someone, how does that person know whether the contact is legitimate or a scam?
That's a great question. There is always a number on there to call. There's often, and perhaps always, an email on there. It's going to be michigan.gov, @michigan.gov. So that's one way you can reach out via email. You can reach out via phone. And I believe they may even direct you to a website in the contact that would give you some form of reassurance that that's a legitimate letter. But it's a fair question for sure, because no matter what you do, there's probably a way that you could look like you're legitimate and not be.
I'm going to actually, I don't normally chime in, but just on that note, are there things that you'll never ask for, like somebody's social security number over the phone or bank account information? I mean, are there things that are never asked for via electronic or verbal methods?
I would say, like I said, we stick to letter notification for the most part. So if you have a call from us, supposedly from us, asking for personal information, or an email from us asking for personal information, and there is no prior contact, like you haven't been trying to deal with someone here, I would be wary of that for certain. It's mainly letters.
Great. That's all that's in the chat right now. So you know, we do have some time if somebody wants to.
Oh no, I got lots more content here.
Sorry about that.
Oh,
Okay.
no worries, no worries.
Go for it. You're good then. We have all the
Okay.
questions answered.
All right, let's talk a little bit more in detail about what happens when your return gets stopped. So what's next? And we have here the tax administration kind of in review again, because I just wanted to talk about Tax Administration Services Bureau. Their goal, as I said before, is only to get your return posted correctly. Then when we talk about Tax Compliance Bureau, their objective is to look at the data that's on the system and make sure, you know, we agree that there's nothing out of the ordinary going on there. In that process of inquiring of you, the statute of limitations is really important. I mean, how can you have a tax presentation without at least one legal citation, right? So I gave you a couple sites here. We don't need to read through all of that, but the gist is tax returns, you essentially have 4 years to amend your return, or we have 4 years to ask you about your return or make adjustments to your return. And once that 4 years is closed, with some exceptions, there's no way to adjust that return anymore, which is great because you don't want us asking you about a return that's 10 years old. And you know, we don't want you adjusting something that's that old either. And then the other one here is for adjustments. If we find an adjustment, a proposed adjustment, and send you a letter, you have 60 days to respond. If you don't respond within those 60 days, and we'll talk a little bit about some other options and items, then that adjustment stands and it can no longer be modified. And so, as I said, everything we're doing here is to abide by the law. And none of this is secret either. We tell you right in the letter. You know, you have 60 days to respond. Here are your appeal options. So it's not something that we're withholding or trying to be secretive about. And I'm going to kind of speed it up here a little bit to make sure we get through this stuff. So example inquiries and adjustments, these are the types of things you might see out of these divisions. From any of the divisions within Tax Administration Services Bureau, they might send you something, for example, that says you're missing a form. Your math wasn't right on your return, or we're missing a return entirely. For any division, this is one that we hear quite frequently, where's my refund? I send in my return, where's my refund? And again, I would direct you to the website, which has a way that you can actually locate your refund and the status of it. And then in Tax Compliance Bureau, audit would rarely be sending you anything, adjusting anything, but discovery would be sending you maybe that identity confirmation inquiry. Are you who you say you are, or your tax paid on purchase inquiry. Again, here's the ideal for a common inquiry resolution. We send an inquiry, the taxpayer calls and asks about that inquiry. What do you need? What can I give you? Taxpayer gets that stuff together and sends it to us. We process your response and the inquiry is resolved. That is the ideal. Again, we don't ever hit exactly on that, it seems. So just a couple hints here: taxpayer responsibilities, maintain your Treasury registration information, in other words, your address, especially when we talk about individual income tax. For businesses, there's a lot more to registration than for individuals, just so we can contact you if we have to. Make sure you submit your tax return, your payment and tax due reported on the return. Keep your records. I told you the statute of limitations there, 4 years. So that's how far we can typically go back. And it's always a good tip to respond to Treasury letters. Some people like to set them aside, forget about them, but that can be a bad direction. I'm going to kind of skip over a couple slides here. So the audit process, there's that big scary word again. That's where I worked for 12 years. And an audit will take, and you'll have all your information posted. as far as your return goes. It's been through the process in tax administration services. Now we're looking at it again. And like I said, we're mainly focused on businesses, and we're looking at whatever's in statute. So the period can be 3 or 4 years that we're looking at, and we'll figure out what records we need, notify the taxpayer, and then go out and conduct the audit. Or currently we'll do it more electronically. So that question came up, very common. How was my company selected for audit? So we do have an internal analysis and selection process for audits. We certainly try to find companies that are out of compliance so that we can help get them into compliance. There are mechanics of that process that we can't disclose because, again, we don't want to give people loopholes on how to avoid audit necessarily. Often the auditors themselves don't know how a taxpayer was selected. But what we can say is we look for irregularities in the filings. So perhaps a comparison between, say, companies in a certain industry, and all of them are kind of falling in line with a certain statistic or number, and one is way out of line, that would be an irregularity we would look at. To the question earlier, again, not typically IIT, but that would be the type of thing in IIT that might trigger a discovery inquiry is, most people have this number or this percentage reported here, and your percentage is much higher or much lower. That might be an irregularity that would trigger an inquiry. Now, as I said, I worked in tax compliance for 12 years. And as I also said, what I really like is helping people out and delivering that customer service, that culture of service that is a Treasury building block. And I remember one taxpayer that me and one of my auditors went out on who was extremely fearful of the audit process, lost sleep over it, was very jittery, thinking we were there to maybe shut down her small business or give her a huge tax bill. And we came to find out after talking with her that she might have had a good reason for that, because years and years ago, it sounded like a Treasury auditor, a different Treasury auditor, kind of came in, kept to themselves, didn't say much, seemed to be kind of unapproachable, standoffish maybe, and just left her with a large tax bill and virtually no explanation. And so she was very nervous about the whole process, and rightfully so. But what me and my auditor went about to do was to right that wrong and set things right and give her good customer service. So we talked her through everything. We walked her through the entire process, helped her to fully understand the compliance requirements. We did leave her with a small bill, but we also left her with a smile because we had told her what she could do to stay in compliance. And that's what customer service is all about. I don't feel bad about helping people. Some people ask, don't you feel bad in audit taking money from people? And I see it more of a leveling of the playing field. It's not fair if one taxpayer has to pay $1,000 and another taxpayer has to pay $200 if they're the exact same type of taxpayer. It's an unfair advantage to the one underpaying. And so that's how I've always viewed the audit process. Audit typically tries to get their audit work done in a year. Sometimes it's much less, sometimes it's more. We can extend that statute with waivers. Discovery process, we've kind of already touched on this. I said an auditor might do 20 audits of discovery. So an auditor would dig right in and look at everything in a taxpayer's, in all of their records, whereas discovery would be more likely to look at one little item, but for 1,000 different taxpayers, and send a mailing and say, hey, this one little item seems like we need a little extra support, or it's a little out of whack for 1,000 taxpayers, and then see what kind of response they get to those inquiries. And then they do a number of projects like that. Questions on those? I'm running low on time here, so I might just buzz through to the next portion here and save questions till the end. All right, so appeal. You got a determination from us. Is that game over? Is that the end of things? No, not at all. You have lots of options. And whether it's an audit, whether it's an inquiry, an adjustment, whatever it may be, you have all these options available to you for the most part. The first is submit additional information. That's usually all we're asking for, is we need a little extra support for something. We need an extra form. And we typically won't adjust things unless we have the documentation behind it. So that is your first recourse, is always to submit additional information to us that we're asking for. Call us to figure out what we're asking for specifically. And as I said before, it's important that you respond promptly too, if you do happen to get a letter. Informal conference is another option, also known as hearings. So you disagree with an adjustment that we've made. You can represent yourself, your accountant, your lawyer can represent you. We supply a Treasury representative. That's typically someone from my area. And we have an internal Treasury lawyer who listens to both sides of the issue and makes a determination. It's really a great starting point for getting all your legal matters out on the table. And it's, like I said, it's free. Offer and compromise is a newer program that we have. And it's, whereas you have to be careful about that statute and making sure that you respond within the 60 days, request a hearing within 60 days. For offer and compromise, you don't necessarily have to do it within the statute. Offer and compromise, if there's a doubt as to how much tax liability should be there, so we're not sure and maybe you're not sure, we might be able to compromise on that amount, even though it's a very specific, strict process in how it works. But that's something that would be eligible for offer and compromise. Doubt exists as to the collectability. You have the money to pay. And if it seems evident that you might not have the money, that would be another opportunity perhaps for the offer and compromise. And the third possibility or situation that it might apply to is if a federal offer and compromise has been given. It's a really good move as far as customer service, because before offer and compromise came about, and I don't know, maybe 5 years ago or so, you were just out of luck. You're out of luck if the statute ran out, or if you couldn't find certain records or whatnot. But now you have this option. It's really, people really enjoy it. I mean, as much as you can enjoy a tax type option. And then you always have legal options. In the letters that we send you for any adjustment, we tell you again what your options are. You can appeal informally for informal conference in 60 days. You can appeal to the tax tribunal, and 60 days is also the deadline for that one. 90 days if you appeal to the Court of Claims. I don't know what the difference is. It's just in the law. However, going to court, of course, is more formal. It's more expensive. So it might behoove you to do the informal conference first, and then court afterwards, which you could do in that order as well. I'm going to touch on a few more things here, and then we'll take questions. Just a couple other Treasury functions, just some areas that intersect with tax administration. We've got the Office of Collections. So as the name suggests, they deal with collecting unpaid money. So we've come to a conclusion on a tax return. $1,000 is owed, $200 was paid, $800 is still owed. So we try to reach out to you in tax administration as much as we can, but if we don't have the interaction, we can't get a hold of you, we send it over to collections and they begin collection activity, which again begins with more contact, attempting to let you know, hey, this is the liability that's out there. They have payment plans available for those that can't pay. And if there's no response after multiple attempts or a taxpayer refuses to pay, they can lien property, they can levy, take money out of bank accounts and so on, or garnish wages, that type of thing. Those are their tools. And that's why I say open any mail that you get from Treasury, because it's a lot harder to unwind a levy than it is to deal with it up front. And then the taxpayer advocate, the Office of Taxpayer Advocate. I love them because I love to see our taxpayers getting helped out. This team's awesome at helping out taxpayers. If you feel like your return or your account wasn't treated fairly, or you want another set of expert eyes on it, Taxpayer Advocate is the one to call. Just another great avenue of customer service. And also, let's say you reach out to the governor. Let's say you reach out to your legislator. Oftentimes those inquiries come to the taxpayer advocate to handle as well. So they're very effective, they're quickly, they're fair, they work quickly, they're fair. Yeah, it's really just a great place to have another set of eyes on your concern. And then lastly here, I was just going to give you another plug for my area, also known as Quado, Quality Assurance Tax Technical and Outreach, because everything that we've talked about today here, as far as tax administration, the process, the different areas, my team works with every single one of those areas and regularly. So again, my contact information is here. It'll be supplied to you. And customer service is the lifeblood of my area, absolutely. So I'd give us up in our area as another option for you if you run into challenges, struggles with your tax return. Reach out and we will give you a hand for sure. We've resolved a lot of issues brought in through outreach and through other avenues. Feel free to ask me questions anytime. All right, do we have any final questions or questions that came in through the other sections?
There were a couple questions that came into the chat. How long do you need to keep your tax return on file?
Yep, so 4 years is typical. 4 years is the statute of limitation. It would be 4 years from the date you filed it or the date that it was due, whichever is later. So if it was due April 15th, 2016, then it's going to expire in 2020.
Two-part question. Do most auditors come from the ranks of manual processors?
No, not usually. Auditors have to have a certain number of credit hours in accounting, and oftentimes our customer service representatives either don't have a college degree or don't have the accounting credits if they do have a college degree. So it happens, and sometimes people get their degrees while they're working there, so they can move on to a different area. But for the most part, it's a totally different pool that we draw from for the auditors. Good question.
And this person also asked, are you happy with your IT system?
I might have to plead the fifth on that one. No, our IT, I'm happy with some of them. We have so many systems that we work with. So, some are good. Like I said, I think we lag a little bit behind because we have to make sure our systems are so secure, so they have to be very much tested. So that can be a little bit slow and maybe a little annoying when you see other organizations that have better products. But overall, I'm actually quite happy with how the whole remote working thing has shaken out, because it's forced us to be much more proactive and technologically savvy, and we might not have got there for years and years if we weren't forced to do it this way.
Yeah. If you as a business or an individual have been found to be owing money as a result of an audit, are you more likely then to be audited in the future as a result?
I would say slightly. I mean, if irregularities were found, and so an audit was issued for a company, and we went in and we walked through the records, and either we found that, hey, it's correct, it was just a little irregular, it looked weird, but it's correct, or we feel like we moved you into compliance, then I would say you probably we wouldn't see those irregularities as an issue anymore in the future. However, if we did all the compliance work and then we still saw those irregularities that were determined to be not appropriate, then probably you would be susceptible to audit again.
Okay, and the last question in the chat right now is, are there any whistleblower programs regarding taxes in Michigan?
I'm not aware of anything formal. We'll hear things through all different avenues. For example, you know, we're going out on an audit of a company and they'll say, well, what about this guy next door? You know, and so we might take that and look into it. We would never disclose who said anything about anyone else, but I don't know if we have anything formal. I can look into that.
So that is it for what's in the chat. And I actually have cut and pasted. I couldn't figure out a way to export the chat. I know there's a way, but I'm just going to send you these, and anything that you haven't answered that you want to get back to the class on, you can respond and I can get it to people. But in the meantime, does anybody else have any questions?
And I've got some contact information here. I'm going to send this to you, Susan, to send out. So I've got our outreach information here, which you could reach out to anytime for any tax type. I've got many of the different areas that I touched upon here, the phone numbers for those areas, 2 pages worth. Again, we'll send this out so you don't have to worry about jotting any of this down for the different areas we've talked about. And I really just wanted to thank you for your time and attention today. I hope it's been insightful and interesting, or at least as interesting as taxes can be. And I've enjoyed meeting with you.
And we would like to thank you as well. House appreciates your contribution. Go ahead, David.
Just thank you. This has been really interesting, I think.
Yeah. And very informative. It's a lot of great information. So if you asked a question that was not answered, I will be following up. Clay, if you want to just look at the list of questions, and otherwise, we again thank you so much for blessing us with your knowledge today. And we'll go ahead and close the class. Clay, will you hang on for just a second? I just want to take care of a couple items with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day. So actually, I just wanted, my dog is snoring. Actually, she's barking in her sleep right now, very loudly. What is your email address? I'll shoot these questions to you.
It's corneliusc@michigan.gov. That's CORNELIUSC
C at
Michigan spelled out .gov.
Wonderful. Okay. That was great. That went really well. I think it is very informative and timely, considering we are approaching the end of the year. So other than me following up with these questions, is there anything that you need from me before I close the class?
I don't think so. I mean, if you could get me, and I'll send you an email here with these last slides on it, but if you